Have you ever wondered if we are the owners of our own lives? Let's dive into that topic with our next section, Destiny, a Work in Progress. We're pleased to introduce our next speaker, FLAVIO ZANETTI, discussing the topic, do we live our fate or create our destiny? FLAVIO ZANETTI is an avid Spiritist student and a dedicated worker for the Spiritist movement in the U.S. and abroad. Since 1999, he has been working at the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts. He has helped found the Spiritist Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to advance the awareness, study, and practice of Spiritism in English. He also translates books, articles, and course materials for various publications. Let's welcome to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Let's do it again. A little more enthusiasm this time. Good morning. Good morning. I know I have a very difficult task to talk to you after coffee break. So let's try it again. The third time is the charm. Good morning. Good morning. Much, much better. Much better. So thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for the warm welcome, even though I tried 3 times. So thank you for that. I also like to express our deepest gratitude for the organizers, all the folks behind the scenes of this great event. We thank you for allowing us to spend a few minutes with you discussing and talking about some important topics about fate, destiny, and everything in between. And above all, we'd like to thank our professor, our teacher, our big brother Jesus, that's here with us. He told us, 2 or more people united in thy name, he'll be here, and we are sure that he is here. So we ask him to stay with us, bring peace to our hearts, enlighten our minds, so we can really understand the teachings and the gospel and everything he told us many, many, many years ago. Let's get started. God does not exist. Let me repeat that. God does not exist. You may be asking, am I in the right conference? Yes, you are. I say this because this is the thought that permeated into many, many thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people's minds 15 years ago. This image was taken in Indonesia, in a mosque that was completely devastated by the tsunami. So when you look at this picture, we may ask ourselves the question, where is God amidst all these difficult tragedies, problems that we can even imagine how to fix? Where is God? Is this fate? Has anybody contributed to creating this? Or was this just some wish of the nature that ended up driving forces, so much so that 300,000 plus physical lives were decimated in the number of minutes? The questions keep piling up. Why him and not me? Why so-and-so and not me? A lot of people were asking these questions. And as we learn through Spiritism, right, events like this, they do have a purpose. They do have a reason for happening. I'll just give you one that's very, very important for us to understand. Thanks to events like this, humankind starts to really develop themselves into way more altruistic behaviors. The entire world stopped to contribute, to donate, to volunteer, to offer help, assistance for those brothers and sisters of ours that perished thanks to the tsunami. But the question still remains, is that fate? Am I destined to live through something like this? Was that in my quote-unquote plan in my life? Or more so, is there a specific book that talks about all the specific incidents that on May 4th, 2019, all 200 of us or more, give or take, were supposed to be here studying these topics? Is there such a book? Julio talked very well and very wisely about some people believe that book exists, to be honest. Other people don't believe at all that the book exists. What we, Spiritists, believe is that fate or destiny. If you look at yourselves today and all the events that happen, that have happened, and they might happen to your lives, is fate, or does fate play a role in it? I'm sure you know, you've heard, you listened about somebody that maybe have missed a plane that ended up crashing because of traffic. I did. My former boss in 1996 missed a plane that was supposed to leave Sao Paulo, the very same plane that ended up crashing, but he missed that based on the traffic in the city. I, for starters, used to work in the North Tower in the World Trade Center up to August 31st, 2001. 11 days before. We all know what happened that day. But the question's still there for a lot of people. Is it fate? Are those things scribed somewhere? Everything that happens in our lives, do we cause them? Are they caused by us or by somebody else? Does God really want us to go through these things? How do we answer these questions? Thankfully, we have Spiritism, but before we get there, it's also very wise and important to go to the dictionary. Because if you look, the definition of the word fate and destiny, even though people use them interchangeably, they're not really the same. Let's take a look. Fate is the development of events beyond somebody's control. So, for example, the tsunami, nobody could have controlled anything like that, right? So we know that. So the important piece here, the definition, is beyond somebody's control. So it's done unto you. It happens to you. You don't control it. Destiny, on the other hand, are the events that will necessarily happen to an individual. For example, if I'm driving on New Jersey Turnpike at 95 miles an hour, please don't ever try that at home, kids. That's not for you to try at home. If you drive at 95 miles an hour, the likelihood of a state trooper pulling you over is pretty high. Is that fate or destiny? That's pretty easy, right? That's very easy. Let me ask you a more difficult question. What if you were born without limbs? What if you were born with no arms or no legs, or you can't see, you're blind, or any kind of deficiency? Physical, mentally, psychologically, psychiatric, or whatnot. Is that fate or destiny? Gets confusing, right? It gets confusing. So allow me to bring a story that's going to help us highlight what we're talking about here. So meet Liu Wei. I'll pause for a few seconds so you can actually digest this picture. Does anybody here play the piano? Raise your hand. Few people. Was that easy to learn the piano? Probably not. Takes multiple years, right? We know that. Look again at Liu Wei. He plays the piano with his toes, ladies and gentlemen. He plays the piano with his toes. So, what's Liu's story? When he was 10 years old, he was playing hide and seek like a normal child, like maybe our kids do it today. We've done it in the past, just playing hide and seek. All of a sudden, he touches a high voltage wire with his hands, and that causes a massive incident that he ends up losing both of his arms. He spends 45 days in very critical condition at the hospital, between life and death. In the hospital itself, he met an armless painter, somebody that painted with his feet as well. And that person gave him a lot of inspiration. So you know what, Liu Wei? Life is not over. Yes, this has happened to you, but life is not over. He was faced the choice of saying, you know what? I'm useless. I can't do anything else. Or I can pivot my life in a way that I'm going to make sense of it every single moment. By now, you're actually taking an idea that he's changing his life, right? So what does he do? He accomplishes things that I'm not sure about you, but I wouldn't be able to do it myself at all. For example, he won 2 gold and silver medals for the disabled national championship in China. I can barely swim, folks. I mean, I have both land, right? I mean, for comparison purposes. He won the very first prize of China Got Talent. I know I got some talents, just ask my wife, she'll tell you, but not America's Got Talent. I mean, forget it. It's just way, way out of my league. We know that. He got first prize in 2010. Doesn't stop there. He goes more. He signs a contract with Sony Music and played all over the world. Vienna, Shanghai, Las Vegas, Hong Kong, and you name it, right? Anybody here has a contract with Sony, any other record label that we know of? Probably not. He has no arms, folks. He plays the piano with his toes. Gets better. He's in the World Guinness World Record, typing most letters alphabetically in 1 minute. How? With his toes. I mean, I work with computers all day long, every day. I can type pretty well. When I read this, I said, yeah, maybe I'll record it. I won't even tell you how many. I'm so embarrassed, I won't even tell you how many. And I thought I was actually pretty good. I can't even tell you how many. So when we look at an example like Liu Wei, what does that tell us? Is that fate that happened to him? Or it was his own destiny? While we don't understand the right or the intrinsic reason why that happened to him, Spiritism, this marvelous body of knowledge that we learn, right? This philosophy of moral consequences that teaches us that everything that happens to us has a reason. And in a situation like this, when we're talking about afflictions, suffering, we know that the reason is either created in this life or in a previous one. If we were to take a guess, a 10-year-old child, that's still a child. So we don't understand Liu's, right, reincarnation program is, but we know that that actually had a reason for this to happen. And he took that, he totally changed it, he revamped it in a way. Now he's a role model for disabled kids in China. He travels all over the place, talking to kids, serving as a role model, as an inspiration for a lot of kids to do not give up their lives should an incident or a tragic accident like this ever happens to anybody. Okay, Flavio, but that's very tragic, it's just, can you bring something more real to like a daily lives? Okay, we can do that. So, when it comes to choices, in the case of Liu, for example, right, we learn from Spiritism that fate only really exists when applied to the choices that we have made before incarnation. Marcia gave us a great grasp of the purpose of reincarnation, that is to develop ourselves, that is to advance morally, intellectually, right? To grow as spirit beings that we all are. But sometimes we make choices that you undergo a specific trial. And I'm sure you all know examples. Oh yeah, my neighbor was great because something happened that I couldn't even imagine if that happened to me. It's all there, all the time. We listen to these things, right? So Spiritism teaches us that even what we call fate sometimes, I can't change it, it was done upon me. These things, oftentimes we planned beforehand for our own development, for our own progress, for our own inner enlightenment, inner progress itself. Okay, Flavio, but can you simplify a little more, right? Because that's what I tell my wife. I don't understand smoke signals, right? So, for example, she goes, honey, it's cold here, right? And I said, yeah, it's pretty good. It's cold. It's cold. She goes, it's cold here, right? Oh, yeah, it's cold. It's like 68 degrees. I live in Boston, if you don't know that. Unbeknownst to me, she wants me to turn the thermostat. Why didn't she ask me, honey, can you please turn the thermostat? She said, oh, it's cold here, so I don't understand smoke signals. So for me, Spiritism is very pragmatic, right? It's lessons, gives us lessons and really knowledge that we can apply in our day-to-day lives. If that weren't so, I wouldn't probably be stuck with this, right, for the rest of my life, to be honest. So let me give you one more practical example. You ready? Raise your hand if nobody in your family is a problem. Raise your hand if you get along with everybody in your family. I don't see any hands. Have you asked that question why? Why is that so? Why is it that my cousin, notice, it's never me. Why is it that my cousin, my uncle, my grandmother, my mother-in-law, it's never me? Why is it so? Because we always look for the eyes of the beholder, right? So we're always looking for everybody else and not ourselves. So we never even stop to ask the question, why am I causing all this trouble for so-and-so? So look at this family. It's a very functional, quote-unquote, not dysfunctional family. The husband is looking about this business, is, whatever deal's going on. Look at the son's face. Look how happy he is. The brand new Nintendo or whatever, again, a video game. Look at the daughters listening to some music. And if you have kids that age, I'm sorry, you may actually empathize with this picture. Look at the fence. Look at the wife only thinking about the beach. So I live in, again, New England, almost like here. It's very cold. My wife always looks for a vacation at the beach, but I'm hoping not all the time. But I mean, honestly, why is it that we have sometimes dysfunctional families? What does Spiritism teach us when it comes to those? Oh, it's very simple. We are in the right place with the right people with the best opportunity that we have to grow. Spiritually, morally, intellectually. At very least, we have amazing opportunities to learn, to be more patient, to be more resilient, to be more forgiving, and to be more altruistic for people that are there living with us. Those are the very same spirits that we have been living sometimes. We have some relationships and whatnot. And then I was giving a close, related lecture, and somebody, oh, Flavio, but you don't know my husband. I was like, I don't. It's true, I don't know him. Oh, I had to divorce him because, I get it. And then what happens? Then I got the second husband, same problems. It was like almost his brother. I was like, yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that, ma'am. I mean, it is sad. It really is sad. Because, again, we don't stop to look at the problems from our own lenses, from our internal selves. What do? He and she and, oh, poor mother-in-laws. If you have one, or if you are one, I'm so sorry for you. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll give an example. My mother-in-law, whom I love the most, she lives with us, right? And I have 2 young kids. They're 6 years old. They're twins. It's very difficult, right? Because, all of a sudden 2 for the price of 1, it's actually difficult. So she helps us, and she's amazing, by the way. But one time I was going to go on a business trip, and then I exited my bathroom, and I was looking for underwear. I pull up a drawer, and no underwear. And I said, I got to travel like in 2 hours. I don't have any clean underwear. Something's wrong with this picture, right? So Stella, I'm sorry if she's watching. Stella, what happened to my underwear? Oh, yeah, I changed drawers because they were so tall, and then they were all the way to the bottom drawer. Now they're like in the same height. Since you open them all the time, it's easier for you. I kid you not, she did that. I'm not kidding, it's true. And then I stopped and I thought to myself, she's only trying to help. And I'm not seeing that. To me, it clicked. It struck me in a way that I better stop paying more attention, right? On some of these smallest things that happen in everybody's lives. That's why, to the point, I believe, and I advocate for this, for Spiritism to be very simple and pragmatic, that can give us lessons for our daily lives. Because my friends, if I can call you friends, because you're all amongst friends here, the time that we used to go to the church on Sunday morning and put on our best suit, use our best language, listen to the priest, the clergy, and whoever giving us the lessons, then the moment we left there and came back home, we forgot everything, those days are gone. I kid you not, those days are gone. We know more now that, as Marcia told us, reincarnation. Yeah, we're progressing. This is one chapter of our lives only, not the chapter. It is the most important chapter because it's the chapter that we can do what? We can drive our destiny. We can say, you know what? If I'm not happy with who I am right now, I can change it. If I don't like this, it's only about me to change it and nobody else. That's the beauty of Spiritism. It's not fate. We're not destined, right? Yes, I have chose my family, but this is the best family that can help me move on to the next grade, to the next step, to the next level, and so forth, right? So, some people ask the question, are people just sometimes born with the nature, of being good or being evil? Because my cousin, that guy he's trouble. He's always been trouble, and right? Notice never ourselves, always somebody else. So what do we know from Spiritism? So we learned that no, it is not true. But before we get to Spiritism, let's look at these two, thoughts that permeated throughout centuries, humankind. On the left, the Frenchman Jean-Jacques Rousseau. On the right, the Englishman Thomas Hobbes. And they were very different in their perception. Rousseau believed that people are naturally innocent and good, just naive. And they may be corrupted with nature, of civilization, or society. Hobbes, on the other hand, believed that the natural state of man or human being is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, short. Can you see the manichaeism, the dichotomy of the two? I'll just leave you with one data point. Rousseau was a religious man. Hobbes was an atheist. So what do we learn from Spiritism? Very simple. In the Spirit's book, we learn that humans are not fundamentally led to evil. We're not. We're just not. Sometimes we ended up doing bad things, poor things, based on choices. But we're not led to evil. And by the way, we also learn from Spiritism that even though we understand mediumship and obsession, all those things, ultimately, whose responsibility is if you do anything? Yours, mine, all of us, right? All of ours, right? Oh, but the priest told me to do this. But so-and-so told me to do this. Or I went to the center and somebody told me, no, we have free will. We have the ability to discern, to understand, because nothing's been written beforehand. Nothing in a way that May 4th, 2009, no. We are creating destinies as we go forth. Crimes that people commit, right? It's not that, it's the result of their own decree of destiny. They are creating these things for them. Nobody's born, oh yeah, you were, supposedly gonna, no. That's not what we learn. We learn that free will exists in the spirit state, some of these fate situations that we learn, right? But in the choice of trials, not in the specific atonement or trial or difficulty that happens to us. For example, if in one incarnation I'm more, tendacious to do certain things, right? In the next incarnation I come back and I'm not able to do those things. One more example that's pragmatic, right? Imagine if you were born without any limbs. So not like Liu Wei's case, but no hands, no arms, no legs, nothing. Is there any positive of being born that way? People may think, Flavio, I just don't get it. This one is nice, just no. Actually, there is, right? Heaven and Hell has a story of a spirit who, throughout the last 10 plus incarnations, committed suicide. In this life, it's impossible for that being to commit suicide because he has to be cared for 24/7. So there are situations that we learn through Spiritism that starts to make more sense. It's like when you go and you open our minds to new things, right? So if you look at good, again, evil and good, right? Good is in everything that we do that's in harmony with the law of God. Everything. If you're being nice to others, right? If you're doing unto others what you like others to do to you, every time we're behaving that way, we're coming closer to God. We're progressing towards God. That is to do good. And hey, but what is really evil then? Every time you go against it, right? By elimination, every time you move away from getting closer to God, that means you're not doing anything good, which means you might actually be doing something evil. That's in Spirit's book, question 872. It's right there. It is right there. So the question is two bags for me to ask you. Do we leave our fate or create our destiny? I think it should be pretty certain by now that no fate. We do create our destiny, yes. And one piece that really inhibits or prevents us from creating a fulfillment destiny is the attachment to moral things. The more we take interest, the more we are really hooked on material development, right? We're moving away from our true nature, which is spirits that we all are. Flavio, does that mean that I have to donate all my money? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to make good use of every treasure, every gift that God has given you, so you can really better yourself or better others. All right, let me ask you a tricky question. I'm going to preface by saying tricky question. Does money buy happiness? What do you think? Let's do this. If you believe money buys happiness, raise your hand. 1. If you believe that money doesn't buy happiness, raise your hand. Okay, if you are sleeping, raise your hand, because I'm actually missing hands. Somewhere here, there are not enough hands. Or missing hands here. Ladies and gentlemen, please. So for the lonely star in the back that raised his hand, I believe it's his hand, you're right. Money buys happiness. So long so, you're actually making someone happy. Every time you use money to make someone happy, that brings happiness to you. If somebody is hungry and you buy that person, a plate of food, that buys happiness. If you need to donate money to a good cause, and the Spiritist conversations are out there, there's a table, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. Please visit us at the end. So every time you donate money to a good cause, you're actually buying yourself happiness. Right? That's the artificial way for you to interfere in your progression towards happiness. Isn't it beautiful? It is, right? So when you look at this life, that sometimes is black and white, you don't know where to go, right? What are these steps to create this really, really, really amazing destiny ahead? Do I have to be a saint? Do I have to read the Spirit's book 15 times every year? Do I have to go to Spiritist Center 4 times a week? I don't believe that's the answer, to be honest. Because when Kardec mentioned that without charity, there's no salvation, notice he didn't mention without Spiritism, right? Without truth. He didn't. So he mentioned without charity, which is without love. The more love we give to others, the more altruistic behaviors we have in our own lives, right? We can really pivot our destiny. But if you really want to know more about what it is to really build a happy and a peaceful destiny, Susanna's coming up next. No pressure, Susanna. That's you, right? So one thought at a time. And for us to really wrap this small conversation here, I'd like to invite our professor or big brother that have told us and have given us so many lessons, so many teachings, and we oftentimes forget some of them. And one that's very appropriate for what we're talking about here is this: God will reward each one of us according to what our deeds are. God is not going to look how wealthy you are, how XYZ you are, if you're tall, skinny. No. It's all about deeds. With that, I wish you, your families, your loved ones, an amazing rest of your day, an amazing, blissful, fulfillment lives ahead. May God bless you and the United States movement. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Flavio. I do highly recommend we all check our underwear drawer before Monday morning. It's a good reminder. I do have an important announcement to make. If anyone is missing a car key to a Honda, it is over at the front desk, so please check it out. Now, knowing we are in charge of our destiny takes us to the next step. Where does our responsibility start? Well, this is coming up next. Let's welcome our next speaker, Suzanne SIMØES, who will talk about building happiness and peace, a thought at a time. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Suzana was raised Spiritist and has been in the United States for 24 years. She is one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Miami, Florida. She's worked 12 years as a board member of the Spiritist Federation of Florida, and this last year as a board member of the United States Spiritist Federation group. Suzana's main area of work is the dissemination of Spiritism in the English language.
Good morning. I have a mission here, keep up the energy level of my dear friend FLAVIO ZANETTI. All right, so we're gonna talk about building happiness one thought at a time. And I would like to start by saying that thought is matter and thought matters. How can we understand these two statements is what we are going to try to do in the next 30 minutes. And we are going to do that by revisiting some basic concepts in Spiritism, or perhaps they are not so basic, but we'll try to make them as basic as possible so that we can understand how our thoughts establish our realities and our happiness, and sometimes our misery. So let's start from the beginning, revisiting the concept, the definition of thought, with the Spirit Emmanuel in the book Life and Thought. He says that he defines thought as a creative force projected by the person who generates it by means of subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction. I know, what did you just say? Right? But we will explore that little by little. In Genesis, we also learn that thoughts are for the spirits the same thing that our hands are for us. With our hands, we manipulate the world around us. With thoughts, the spirits are able to manipulate, to compose the subtle energy that fills the universe. In the book Mechanics of Mediumship, we learn that the subtle energy is composed by also very, very subtle elements, many of them unknown to us, and many of them that go way beyond those annoying elements, forgive me, that's my bias, that we learn in the periodic table. Perhaps you loved the periodic table when you were in school, not me. So, moving forward, another important concept is the concept that the thoughts that we emit, they have actually a form, they have a specific weight, they have a density, if you will, they have color, and they have also a vibratory frequency. And each one of us have a specific range in which we vibrate, in which we think. The Spirit Emmanuel, in the same book, he will talk about it, saying that the mind is the field of our awakened consciousness, where the evolutionary phase of our knowledge allows us to function. What does that mean? It means that each one of us has a very low point of vibration, of frequency in our thoughts that we experience when we are deeply, deeply identified with the material level. But there are moments in our lives that we reach the highest frequency that we can produce. Those are moments where our actions and thoughts are in line with love. Those are moments where we are praying. Those are moments where we are meditating. Those are moments perhaps when we are undergoing very, very difficult struggles that are transformative, that have the power of bringing some spiritual insight and deeper knowledge about who we are. Those moments where we align what is very essential in our lives, we change our vibration, we change the frequency of our thoughts in a more vertical direction. So each one of us has a range. I have my lowest and my highest. Flavio has his lowest and his highest. And so our perception of life is going to be according to the frequency that we vibrate. Where our thoughts produce is another important concept that we need to visit. So for the materialistic paradigm, thoughts are produced by the brain. But for us in Spiritism, our thoughts are produced by the mind. But aren't they the same? No, not necessarily. Not at all, actually. Because the brain is the physical organ that is going to process and it's going to manifest the ideas, the will, the desires of the spirit, where the mind actually resides. The mind, the compartment that we call mind, according to Andrew Lewis, resides in the spiritual body. And so thoughts are produced by the spirit, not by the brain. The brain manifests our thoughts. Another important concept that Emmanuel brings to us is from our thoughts emerge the threads, generating the causes from which circumstances are born, thus bringing either destruction or liberation to our lives. So, what does that mean? Let's translate Emmanuel from English to English, right? What is he talking about? From our thoughts emerge the threads, generating the causes from which circumstances are born, thus bringing either destruction or liberation to our lives. Okay, so we have our thoughts, we have our ideas, and so if we put two different persons in front of a picture, in front of a circumstance, in front of a person, let's say that this person is, in general, perceived as someone who's hostile. And two persons are facing these three examples that I put to you. They will be looking exactly at the same external scenario. But their interpretation, their perception, their understanding, their view of the external is going to be different. So we may look at the same picture, and I may see something different than somebody else. We may look at the case presented by Flavio with the child without the arms, and we might have very different reactions to what that means. So what is the difference? The difference, as Flavio said so many times, is not out there. The difference, what determines how we live our lives, is how we see life, how we see what's outside of us. And this is why Emmanuel is going to say that life mirrors the mind. Life mirrors the mind. In other words, the way you perceive life, the way you understand life is a mirror of your inner reality. And this is very powerful and somewhat disturbing, right? So our thoughts, the frequency of our thoughts, the way that we project our thoughts has everything to do with our inner reality. And it is precisely our psychic and our emotions that determine the quality of our thoughts and the quality of our lives. I said a lot in very little time. So I'm going to summarize the points that I have said before moving forward. I said that we are immersed in subtle energy that fuels the universe. I also told you that the mind creates thoughts, and the mind is part of the immortal being. I told you that thoughts are a creative force emitted in waves, that with our thoughts we manipulate the energy in the universe, that our thoughts have color, density, and a frequency, and that our thoughts can cause destruction or liberation. And finally, I said that life mirrors the mind. So moving forward and back to the book Mechanics of Mediumship, we learned that God creates, and we create just like God. God creates in a much bigger scale through its wish and the manipulation of the fluid that fills the universe. We do the same thing. And we do the same thing, and when we think, we create thought forms. And I would like to give an example about thought forms. In the book Mediumship, Path to Happiness, not yet translated, by Sueli Calder Schubert, she tells a story about a meeting that she goes to. The meeting in the Spiritist Center was designed specifically to attend people who had had recent losses for death, the death of a loved one, and were having a difficult time coping with the loss of the person. So the meeting was a lecture followed by a visualization. The visualization was always the same. It was a lake, a very beautiful lake, and around the lake there was this very extensive area of grass. So people were invited to go to the lake and to meet with their loved ones at the lake and have a dialogue with them. And then at the end of the meeting, they would exchange impressions. Well, that particular day, during the visualization, she sees on top of the grass a car. And she did everything within her power to remove the car from the grass unsuccessfully. So when he finished the meeting, she shared her experience with the group. And a woman who was at the group, she said, "What car was it and what color was it?" And she said, "It was a black Chevy." She said, "The car is mine." And she's like, how come? "Well, I purchased this car not too long ago. And this car has given me nothing but trouble and problems. It has broken so many times. It has created so many embarrassing situations for me. I'm not a spiritist. I've never been to a spiritist center, but I thought it has to be a spiritual cause. So I decided to come here to see if you guys can help me blessing the car." So I walk into the center and I noticed that you have books where you write names. So I wrote the model of my car and the tag. And throughout the entire meeting, I asked the spirits to please help removing whatever it is so that the car can function again. This is a powerful thought form that was created by the persistence, by the concern of that person, and that a medium who is a little bit more sensitive was able to capture. And it was so solid and so real that she was unable to remove it. My question for you is, what have you been creating? What thoughts are you nourishing consistently, holding in your minds? Because you are creating thought forms. But thoughts go beyond the thought forms outside of us. Thoughts also have an effect in us. So we are made of a material body. We are spirit, which is immaterial, and we have in between a semi-material body, also made of this subtle energy. Therefore, every time we think, this subtle energy in our perispiritual body is sensitive and responds to the nature of our thoughts. So before we create cars on top of grass, that thought first flows through our system, our energetic system. So every time we are nurturing, and pay attention, I'm not saying that you have a thought of anger or a thought of bitterness, but every time we withhold and nurture those thoughts, we are actually baiting our central nervous system, our vascular system. We are putting in our blood cells and taking to every single cell of our body that toxic nature, the toxic vibration of our thoughts, and that's how we are creating for ourselves states of well-being or states of diseases and disorders. But thought does something else. Thought creates our spiritual identity. So there's the concept of aura. The spirits recognize us whether we come here dressed up or not, smiling or not, pretending to be okay when we are not. We have a spiritual identity that does not lie, because every living being projects energy. We have energy being produced by our cells, and that is being projected, like a plant does as well. But different than a plant, we think, we have a psychic, we have emotions, and so all our experiences and our emotions are also projected together with the biological energy that we are producing, creating our spiritual identity. And this is how we are recognized in the spiritual world. Now let me go back to the beginning definition by Emmanuel, when he says that thought is a creative force projected by means of subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction. That's what we're going to talk about, circuits of action and reaction. And we're going to talk about that using the concept, the very well-known concept of social networks. You can choose whether you want to be on Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. But I'm here to tell you today that you belong to a social network that's called the immortal social network, the social network of minds in the spiritual realm. Whether you want it or not, whether you know it or not, you are part of it. And you are posting every second of your life. And the very scariest thing about this network is there is no privacy option. It's out there all the time. And this network has some principles, important principles that we need to understand. The principle of mental reflex, the principle of affinity, the principle of association, and the principle of reciprocity and influence. We're going to learn about those in 2 minutes, very quickly, but you will get it. So the first thing I would like to talk about is the principle of mental reflex, because according to Emmanuel, the principle of mental reflex is at the core of life. When I read that for the first time, I was like, this sounds very important. Because if it is a principle that's at the very core of life, what does that mean, right? So I went ahead and took some time actually trying to study and understand what Emmanuel meant. And here is the description given in the book. Mental reflex speaks about the dynamics of mental waves, how the mental waves behave, and their reciprocal nature, how they influence one another. Those emitted, the ones that we send, and the ones that we receive after being modified by the effects that they have produced. And I thought, how can I speak about that in a very simple way? Let's go back to Facebook. So when you post on Facebook, you emitted your thought. Well, once the posting's there, it's going to reach all the people who are in your network. And these people are there because they have affinity with you. Some level of affinity. Maybe they like your glasses and decide to be your friend. I don't know. But for some reason, they enter your network because they felt affinity with who you are, how you dress, whatever that might be. All right. So your thought is going to reach and find many other people who have affinity with you. And then it's going to be association. It's going to be interchange of ideas. So people are going to like it. I like it. I like what you're posting. But then beyond that, they are going to add the particularities of their thoughts to your posting. So they're going to comment on it. And there will be an interchange, an exchange of ideas. I put my idea, now you give me some positive feedback back. And then 2 minutes later, if I'm not too anxious that day, I'm going to go there to see who has liked it. And I'm receiving back the posting that I put, my thoughts, now added by the many likes that I receive, by the many comments who have joined my initial thought, and the consequences that those comments had in people's lives. And what happened after that? Isn't that simple? Isn't that freaky? Because now, let's think about real life. We are doing this at all times. Realize that every single idea you post in the universe, because this is a reflex, it's called mental reflex. The very nature of reflex is this, is something that happens automatically without your consciousness. When you go to the doctor and the doctor hits your patella tendon and stretch the fibers of the tendon, you cannot stop. The information goes to your spinal cord, associates with some neurons, and you have a response back. So this is happening, is an automatic process that happens at all times. When I was preparing for this lecture, I thought to myself, I really, really want to quit thinking. Because it's very scary. And so Emmanuel, speaking to that, says, in any opinion we give, we are always, always the sum of many people. And now we understand why. Now, okay, it's a little scary. What can we do about it? So I'm going to propose to you 2 different paths to deal with that. And, you know, some of you know that I live with a psychologist, so I have these psychological terms. And I'm going to say that the first path is a little psychoanalytic, and the second path is behavioral. Meaning, the psychoanalytic path is the path that goes and seeks to fix situations at the very core, at the very source of the problem. And the behavior is like, okay, how can I manage this behavior here and now? The psychoanalytic path goes more or less like this. First thing that is important is to recognize our reality. Okay, we are going to have these thoughts. There's no 2 ways about it. So, but the first important thing is to recognize what is it that we are thinking. What am I producing, right? And the reality that I live in today and now is, as Flavio says, something that I built myself. No one else has created the misery that I find myself in but me. That's the first starting point, and that's why it's so hard to have people who come to Spiritism and stay in Spiritism. That's very uncomfortable, an uncomfortable thought. Have hope Because if you put yourself in this place, it's also within you the possibilities of changing your reality. Watch and pray. Not others. Watch yourself. Right? So it's important that we bring this to our daily lives. We have so many encounters. Sometimes at work, sometimes at the Spiritist Center, someone comes and criticizes us in a given moment. And we have that very, very uncomfortable feeling that we call irritation. First step is to understand, is to acknowledge to yourself, say to yourself, I am irritated. This is the first thing. But you need to recognize, you need to watch your feelings at any given moment. Be prepared, open, and courageous, because in this approach, you're turning the lenses inwards, and you are not necessarily going to feel comfortable with what you see. But it's important that you label the feelings by giving it a name, but don't judge them. Because the very first thing that we do, and that is totally counterproductive in terms of spiritual enlightenment, is to label our feelings. This is good or this is bad. Don't do that. Can you just put a name and bear it? After identifying the feeling, do not rationalize. Oh, I'm a spiritist, I shouldn't be feeling like this. No, don't do that. Don't do that. The gospel says that I should be good. Yes, that will come later. At this moment, acknowledge your humanity and embrace it. After that, if you allow yourself to feel, then be curious. What does this mean? What is this feeling trying to tell me, trying to teach me? What is it truly about? Am I missing something? Am I lacking something? Is there a wound that needs to be healed within me? Pray for guidance. Invest in what is essential, positive thoughts, so that they can be instrumental in assisting you in the process. Be kind and understand that the biggest hurdle for your self-transformation and enlightenment is you. And in the book Mechanics of Mediumship, there is a very powerful passage towards the end where the spirits tell us that the greatest difficulty is that we are very, very comfortable and very used to the vibratory level that we have been living in for many, many, many incarnations. Because people ask me, they say, I want to truly change, but I can't. Yes, you can. It's just hard. It's scary to move to a new place. Although we have been living many times in misery, misery is what we know best. At least we're comfortable over there. And so this is not me saying, the Spirit's telling Mechanics of Mediumship, read the book, the difficult in changing the vibratory level. Practice self-love. And I'm going to pick on my very dear, beloved friend, Daniel Assisi. If you don't know him, you will. All right. And I'm going to pick on him just to give a little example. We were coming together, and I was telling him, how can you do all these things that you do, right? And I could have very well gone to a path to say, oh, but this that he's doing is not so good, and find ways to criticize his work. Not that you guys do that, but it happens to me sometimes. And then the important thing is, when you enter in that mode of thinking, you need to stop, watch myself, not him, and label the feeling. Okay, Susanna, what is this? What's happening? This is called envy. I love you, Danny. This is called envy, right? Okay, so, oh no, I shouldn't feel envy. No, I'm feeling envy. Okay, let me see what envy feels like. Now let me be curious about envy. So why do I feel like this? Is it because I want to be him? Is it because I want to do the things that he is doing? Is it because I want to be seen as he's seen, have the visibility, have the credits. Perhaps I'll feel more worth it if I do all the things that he does. And then you start to be curious. Because every time we start putting someone else's work down, a lot of times, the truth behind it is we're very envious of that work and what that person is actually able to produce. So it's important to be curious about it. And it's important to understand that this is a process, is a moment-to-moment practice. With this curiosity, if we bear the feeling, if we don't rush to rationalize, if we don't rush to explain, if we open space to hear our own soul, perhaps I'm going to realize that there is a wounded child within me that wishes to be seen. And in the moment that I realize the true nature of my pain, then there is a vibratory frequency, a real one. Because now I'm able to cherish him for who he is and what he does, while cherishing myself for who I am and what I do. But obviously, as you can see, this is a very, very long journey. One, not for a lifetime, but for many lifetimes. What do you do in the meantime to decrease the amount of damage that we cause a lot of times with our thinking process? Then we can use a behavioral approach proposed by Emmanuel in the book Life and Thought, chapter 2, where he talks about the power of will. And he will say that the mind has several departments: desire, intelligence, creativity, memory, but above all, the most important one is the cabinet of will. And he says that we cannot stop the mental reflections. We cannot change miraculously and abruptly where we are in our evolution. It takes time. But we can use will to keep our lives organized and to use all the powers that we have in the direction of good. We can impose upon our reflexes. So what this means is, actually, I don't know if you haven't done this, but kids like to do that. So when you go to the doctor and the doctor is going to hammer your knee, you can actually override the reflex with your will. You can say, I am not going to move my leg. So your will overrides the reflexive action that's taking place. If you focus on it, your leg will not jump. So this is what Emmanuel invites us to do, to practice our will. You will have the thoughts. They are very horizontal in low frequency from time to time. But it's given to you at any given moment the choice to choose to act or not on those thoughts. So I wish you all courage to look at yourselves, love, to embrace yourselves. In a daily practice, take a daily pill of strong will to override, like Paul says, everything is possible for me to do. I can do anything that I want. But at this point in time, if we want to build happiness, we're going to say, but not everything serves me anymore. So work your thoughts in the direction of happiness, one thought at a time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susanna. She left us many gems to go over. Before we move on, we're going to have Q&A very soon. If you have any questions from the last couple of discussions, please write those out and raise your hand. A volunteer will come around and pick those up. And in the next half hour, I believe, those questions will be answered. We've heard some great talks this morning, and we are so grateful for all of these Spiritist teachings.
All the morning speakers got ready for the Q&A session. And thank you all for this. Let's now welcome the moderator of the Q&A, Peter Hayes. Peter has been a member of the Spiritist group Love Light in Newark, New Jersey for several years, where he teaches guitar to kids and adults. Besides lecturing at previous symposiums and doing several episodes of Living Spring on Cardiac Radio, he was on the editing staff for several main Spiritist books. Let's give a round of applause to our speakers and moderator. Huh?
How y'all doing? Good. First, I just want to say, to reflect on the topics that the speakers have presented, to put the time and effort it takes to come up with the presentation, boil it down to 25 minutes, it's a lot of work. So I'd like to thank all four speakers for their time and effort. So I've got a few questions. If any of you have a question that you want to ask, write it down. It's not too late. We'll go as far as we can. And we're going to try to finish this up by around 12:35 or so. Alrighty. First question, Julio. You talked about, of course, comparing creationism and evolution. And they deal with the physical in many ways and what we can actually observe. But what about the way, how does Spiritism expand these ideas to the universe and to the evolution of other planets and so forth? How does this actually occur?
When Peter Hayes introduced the speakers, he was thanking us for the preparation of the lecture. But I think I share a burden here with my fellow friends. It's the fact that when you have 30 minutes to explain such complex subjects, you have no idea how hard that is. You know, give 2 hours, you know. It's like you're asking someone, what's the secret to world peace? 5 minutes, you know. Very hard. So the topic of evolution and creationism, it's very complex in nature because you're talking about origins. And everything that has to do with origins, it's complicated to understand in the evolution that we find ourselves in. And my main concern is that these lectures, they go on YouTube. And people who never heard about this subject from the lenses of Spiritism will be listening to this stuff, and they might judge us based on what they hear. So because of that, I truly apologize for the lack of time that we have to explain such complex subjects. But for one thing is for sure, we Spiritists, we do not claim that we know what God is. We don't. Because we truly don't know what God is. As a matter of fact, Emmanuel, who's a highly evolved spirit, very respected in the Spiritist community, in the book of his own name, Emmanuel, when he talks about evolution, he says that spirits of his level have absolutely no idea what God is. They can only be certain of one thing, that it exists. That this supreme intelligence and the first cause of all things exists. But what is it? They don't know. But what they do know is that evolution applies to everything in the physical and the spiritual realm. Evolution of matter and evolution of spirit. And if someone is truly atheistic, they're always looking for evidence of things. And one of the evidence that we have to speak about these subjects, it's one particular medium, someone who is between worlds. His name is Francisco Cândido Xavier. This man barely finished elementary school. Barely finished. because he had many responsibilities in taking care of his own family. So when he became an adult, he had no time to study, the research. All he did was work, work, work in order to sustain himself and parts of his family members. And he received more than 400 books. What do we mean by this? There were spirits who used his hands in order to write books. Now, someone who is truly atheistic, they would say, well, what is the purpose of writing all these books? To make money for himself. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that he donated all the books to charity. And he is the most read author in South America. Only 10 of these books would make him a millionaire. And he lived by his own means through work. One of the books that he wrote is Evolution in Two Worlds. And one day a reporter asked him, would you please describe to us what was your emotion and feelings while you were receiving the book? Can you tell us something about the book? And he says, well, I was very happy to be an instrument of this book, but I must confess, I have no idea what the book says. And reason being, it's because you must have at least a bachelor's degree in biology, chemistry, geology, so you could have a very light perception of what the book is trying to say, because it's so far advanced. Because what the book is trying to explain for the common reader is that evolution happens not only in the physical plane, but in both planes, the spiritual and the material plane. The interesting thing is, if you are an honest atheist, a materialistic, someone who only believes in the natural world, you will accept the explanation that it is impossible that by natural means life evolved to the point that we find ourselves right now. One of the explanations to this is the phenomenon called the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion is a phenomenon that took place 512 million years ago. And what that phenomenon consists of, it's all these complex life forms emerged. But the fossil records before that does not show simpler forms of life evolving to become so complex. The life forms appeared complex in this phenomenon called the Cambrian explosion. So a true materialistic, atheistic, but honest individual who doesn't have any preconceived ideas about his lifestyle would say, okay, I admit this, all these lives appeared. It could have been that other civilizations from other planets designed this life, and then natural evolution took its course. We Spiritists, we say exactly the same thing, because we go with science, as Allan Kardec stated. Do not accept anything, ponder, rationalize, and go with science. And we believe in the same thing. Highly evolved entities designed the beginnings of life. Natural and artificial selection has been in control. But not only of biological forms, but all matter. The universe had a beginning, and that evolved into stars, into galaxies, and so are we here. But then I only have 6 minutes to explain something very complex.
I'm glad you're the one who answered this question. Oh.
Okay. This question is for Marcia. Marcia, this is more of an ethical question regarding a situation that many families often. Hello? As we all know, in today's health world, we can keep someone alive for quite a while. But if a family is faced with the possibility of deciding whether to end a person's life or prolong it, what is Spiritism's view about this?
Well, thank you for the question. Spiritism tells us that we should understand that as scientific progress comes in, that we should allow those progress to the technological instruments to allow us to live. Why is that? Let's pretend, for example, I am in a coma, and I naturally am there, but that one breath, 1 minute of consciousness after, I don't know how long it took for me in that coma, allows my spirit to grow at the level that I needed. That consciousness of my spirit in that 1 minute, it was worth it. Now, let's talk about our material lives. I think it's very important for us to understand, as we discussed earlier, that we are here to improve, we're here to learn, to grow, we're here to be happy. We're not here to cause harm. So from material lenses, if the choice to live forever in a coma will hurt your family, you may choose to go ahead and take away the plug. I ask for permission to go back to what I've experienced this past several months, because my family too decided not to resuscitate my mom, and it was very difficult. It broke the family apart. So the previous decision to not resuscitate was revoked, and she then went through all sorts of intubation and all of those medical types of steps for you to be kept alive. And those are that group of individuals that were very attached to the material life. They did not have anything to prepare them for death. And a miracle happened, because not only did she remove everything which would have led to her death, she survived, she thrived for 8 months. She retroceded to maybe 20 best years of her life in 8 months. And that was a gift to us, to the family. It gave us the time to learn and to be reconciled, to confront death, until she said goodbye. So I think it's a matter of us understanding that there's always the material aspect that we need to not make a judgment, a blank statement saying go forever or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, I just add one thing here.
Sure.
When she referred particularly to her mother, who is 91 years old. And I think it's, since we're not related, it's pretty clear what to do. Allow the disease to take its natural course, because eventually you will die. But since this topic is so sensitive, if you have someone who's 25 years old, they get into a car accident, and they're in a state of coma, what to do? The rule of thumb is, if the machine it's being used to keep the heart, the lungs, and the brain is active, do not pull the plugs. Reason being, it's because the spirit is in the body and is learning from that experience. However, if science has stated there is no life in the brain, which is the seed of the spirit, there is no life in the brain, and all organs are functioning fine, you can clearly pull the plug. You're not expediting death. You're allowing the disease to take its natural course. Because if all organs are functioning, but there is no brain functioning, then the individual is no longer using that body.
Thank you. This next question is for Flavio. Flavio, In this particular instance, would this be fate or destiny? A person is murdered by another person. Is it fate or destiny for the victim of that murder?
Let me see if I understood the question. So there is a homicide, a murder, and then is it fate or destiny for the victim who was killed?
Yeah, how does one determine, is it fate or is it destiny?
Okay. So we've all heard loud and clear, there's a concept called action and reaction, right? Everything that we do, there's a consequence. We all also learned through Spiritism that the causes of our afflictions are either from this life or a previous one. So that particular scenario, we may not understand what caused it, right? But that was the resulting of events of somebody having the intention, a thought, an idea, a vengeance, or some kind of emotion to go out there and pursue that crime. Are we all clear on this? There's no confusion there. So, is it fate or is it destiny for the victim? The question is still an interesting one because if you look at, I'm the criminal, that I portray that atrocity of ripping someone's physical lives out of the body, right? I must be punished. I must, go through all the, repent. I take it back. I want to, so the whole process takes place. If you are the spirit, the problem is if you are the spirit that for some reason that happened to you, right? So let's say you wake up in the spirit world. Oops, I'm no longer there. Somebody assassinated me. How do I see this? Then you go back into all your previous lives and you see, what have I done for that particular individual, for he or she to have this anger, vengeance, hatred against me? Or have I even done anything at all? Because what we don't realize is that oftentimes what we believe it's coincidence, it's not really coincidence. Nothing is by accident. Yes, we have to watch and pray. Others, thank you, Susanna, for the clarification there. We have to do that, right? But it's really important to understand as life progresses, we have to remove ourselves from the physical body only and look at from the continuation of events. This life is only one chapter of our lives. So it may have been fate for you to go through that difficulty or that atrocity in this life because you had so planned in a previous one. We don't know. That's why it's very difficult to say one or the other. But it's definitely caused by an individual that went there and pulled the trigger, pushed you off the cliff or whatever. Right? Please.
One of the biggest learnings for me about Spiritism is the concept. It's just a simple, but it changes one's life. The concept that there is no victim, there is no perpetrator. When you move that from your equation on judgment of any circumstances, including murder or death, you remove the sense of good or bad. Is it fate or is it destiny? Does it really matter? Right? It could have been a victim of an event. It was not his destiny to have someone kill himself. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have the lens of being able to really see the immortal soul, right, in his own journey. And I think that's the biggest thing for us to start thinking about is whenever we think of each one of us as immortal souls destined to be pure spirits, all of this becomes just details. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I want to add something else. It just came back to me.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Marcia. I do believe it's important to, if we are really dedicated ourselves to progress, to learn, to develop, and this is our goal for this life, as you explained to us, right? If we're stuck in a situation, I don't know what to do, am I going the right direction? And people don't realize that if somebody doesn't like you for whatever reason, let's say an obsessor, either incarnate or discarnate. Oftentimes, if we really stop to say, you know what have I done to that individual? So he chases me all the time. What have I done to you, Julio, that you're always on my back, trying to do something for me? Doesn't happen, just right? So I think if we have the heart-to-heart conversation, and I know that sometimes we can because it's a discarnate spirit, in our prayers, right? Before we go to sleep, right? Really practice intelligent sleep, trying to really understand, because there are no victims. If that happened to us, guess what? We're in that mix together, one way or the other. And that is still a learning opportunity for all of us to do so. So take a step, take a stop, ask yourself a question. Why is so-and-so always going after me? Something you must have done in the past that has caused that individual to cause something to you, right? Think about that.
Thank you. This next question is for Susanna. When I talk to myself, is that me speaking to my guardian spirit? If not, who?
Hello? When I'm talking to myself, is it me speaking?
Yeah, if I'm having a conversation with myself, having some thoughts, am I talking to my mentor spirit? Or if I'm not, who am I really talking to? And I'm just thinking.
I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
What are
So
some
really the answer is I don't know, but I'm going
Yeah.
to say something about I don't know.
How don't you know?
Which is who knows who is listening, right? So we shouldn't really worry about who is listening. We need to look at the content of what we're saying. That's really what we need to worry about. On the other hand, if you have a thought, is it yours or was it suggested to you? Well, what difference does it make? The important thing is what it is that you're thinking. What is it that you're coming to you? So it doesn't really make a lot of difference to identify the source. It distracts us from analyzing the content, which is really what we need to be worried about. But just be sure that as you talk to yourself, someone is listening, and perhaps a crowd is listening and is responding to your thoughts. Not to be afraid, just be aware, be conscious of what you were posting, as I said.
Whoops. Quick follow-up question to Susanna. Speaking of thoughts, how is thought related to magnetism?
That's a great question. And again, I'm going to go back to Julio's comment, right? 30 minutes to talk about thoughts. I was like, how can I make it so that people can understand those very complex concepts? And so I would say for whoever asked this question to go to Genesis. There's a chapter that talks about the laboratory of the invisible world, and there's a description of fluids. And that is where I also took the source where it says that thoughts manipulate the subtle energy. So fluids, another word for energy, is neutral. And we manipulate both outside of us, but we're also energetic beings. And we donate of our fluid, of our energy, of our vitality. So the consistency, the power, the direction, and the quality of our feelings will affect how the energy is moved. So that car that was constructed was the result of a persevering and strong preoccupation of someone. So the same way that we build outside of us, we also donate our own energy, our own fluids, and we can make things happen by the use of our thoughts. So there's a straight correlation between magnetism, the donation of energy, and our thoughts. In fact, It cannot happen. I mean, some people, I shouldn't say that, because some people are so full of fluids that they actually donate sometimes without even having awareness, or spirits can actually utilize their vitality without them being awareness. But the fact is that we use our thoughts to manipulate, to guide, and to give the fluids a direction and a certain quality. I don't know if you guys want to add something to that.
Can I add real quick? So, thanks to a lot of the recent studies in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, we understand that new ways of describing energy. Right? So we know that energy is not only electricity, as we used to think 200 plus years ago. And we also learned today that our thoughts are also energy. So we can actually measure our thoughts into waves. Right? And by measuring these waves, we have some interconnectiveness with other waves that are the same types. That's why you can actually explain through science telepathy and how people communicate with each other without talking, just through thoughts. So if that's the way, that's magnetism per se, right?
It wasn't the very definition of Emmanuel, creative force by the means of subtle waves.
Yep. So it's connected, right?
Thank you. Sometimes in these questions, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, and this will be the case here. This question I'm actually going to direct to all four of you. If any of you want to comment, please do. Why does God allow so many devastating, horrifying, unjust occurrences to those who are most innocent and pure? Or even, let's say, why is cruelty to animals tolerated by God? And why do those who commit such bad acts seem to be allowed to get away with it? Julia.
Everything has to do with your point of view. What is your point of view? Is your view of a point. So if your view of a point is from this planet only, that you have one existence, life has absolutely no meaning. This is why there are so many atheists that reject the idea of creationists, because the explanation that is given of God does not make any sense whatsoever with what they see in nature. Especially the God of the Old Testament, a very vengeful God, a very partial God that selects one kind of beings but loves other kinds of beings. It's a God that is very brutal, a God that is very selfish, a God of warriors. So from that point of view, life doesn't make any sense, and you have atheists who reject the idea of God, and those who doesn't understand God but believe in God can't comprehend these disparities, these tragedies in life. But if your view is from the point of the spiritual world, meaning that this one existence is nothing but a fleeting second in your life, and let me open a parenthesis here. Spiritism does not teach that we have many lives. Our life is just one. Our physical existences are many. And what we label as innocent people, they are innocent before our physical eyes, but in the course of things, in their full life, which is the spiritual life, they are not innocent. Either they have done something to deserve the pain they're going through, or that pain serves as an awakening mechanism for the spirit to start their evolution. And reason being is because evolution happens from the moral point of view in two ways. Either we evolve through love or we evolve through pain. I'll explain. To evolve through love will be for us to listen, to be humble, to acquire knowledge from other people and apply into our lives. A quick example of this You're a teenager, your mother comes to you and says, do not smoke, do not smoke, do not smoke. And you, by being a humble teenager, you say, well, my mother cares for me, she loves me, let me not start smoking whatsoever. And then you grow up and you become a healthy individual. So now you avoid sickness to yourself because you listened to your mother. One can say that the voice of the Supreme Intelligence spoke through your mother's throat, giving you that guidance. Now, let's say I am a proud teenager. And what's a proud teenager? I know everything, there is nothing that you can teach me, and I'll do things on my own. And as a result, I will smoke. And now I'm 45 years old, and I have asthma, emphysema, bronchitis, or lung cancer. So when I get the diagnosis of lung cancer, I throw the cigarette away. And now I realize that pain is teaching me exactly what I refuse to listen from love. So people will evolve either through love or through pain. But what I also want you to consider is this. Evolution is towards infinite. There is no end. And even if we are going through trials and tribulations that we label them as pain, it will come into a moment that this period that took us to evolve, to become from a simple organism, an ignorant individual, to a being that knows everything, that period that took us to evolve, in comparison to our existence, will be so small, almost unimportant to us. The problem is why we are in the painful process, without the knowledge why we are in pain, we think it's for the infinite. But when you gather this knowledge, then you completely change your point of view. And when you change your point of view, you change the way you feel, and then you change the way you act, and you change your destiny. In Christ's word, the truth shall set you free. So we are free from the burden of thinking that suffering will be forever.
Thank you. Flavio?
Thank you, Julio. I think I would like to add a couple of things, if that's okay with all of you guys. To me, the most comforting message of Spiritism is a message of hope in the future, right? So if you are a parent, for example, of 2 children, and one of them is normal with all the limbs, functions properly, and the other one child functions properly, and the other child has some sort of disability, whatever kind we're talking about here. Do you love one more than the other? No. Simple as that. What is God to us? A parent, right? God is our father, mother, parent that loves us all the same. So it wouldn't be fair in our own simple, right, small comprehension to believe that God loves us in one way, that we can speak, we can walk, we can talk, versus not loving somebody else, that it's in a different situation. Let's juxtapose this to accidents or tragedies, right? As I mentioned, the tsunami. Does God love people here more than they love people in Indonesia or Japan? No. But if we don't remove ourselves from the physical bodies and you look at our existence through multiple chapters, like Netflix series. If you pick up a series on Netflix and you only watch one chapter, can you really talk about that series? No, you can't. So you have to watch the chapters. You may know, yeah, it's a police, it's a thriller, it's a drama, right? You know the idea, but you don't know the entire, series, the entire topics that's going to be covered in that series. That's us, folks. That's us. Sometimes we might be the perpetrators in one situation. Other times, we might be the quote-unquote victims in an event. So for the person who asked that question, my recommendation, which I can go over in 30 seconds, the book called Planetary Transition, that talks about these tragic accidents, incidents, right, that happen in the world, that I highly, highly recommend. But one thing I'll leave you, again, the most beautiful thing about Spiritism for me is that he comforts my heart. That while nobody here is special, God doesn't love you more than anybody else. He loves us all the same, with all the love, care, and mercy that we need to do what? You stumble across something, stumble upon something, come on, dust it off, keep on going. He gives us multiple opportunities to amend mistakes, to correct ourselves, to really bring us back towards destination. And if you're curious, how can I know what that destination is? You may use a compass or a GPS called the gospel.
Susanna?
Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit to one aspect of the question, which was why God allowed those things to happen. So we, in our phase of evolution, and you find this in the Spirit's book, we are learning still by contrast. We need contrast in order to learn. Very much like children, when you're starting to teach them, you say, this is dark, this is light, this is tall, this is short. So the kids get the cards that shows them the difference. We are in our spiritual infancy still, and we need the contrast. The other concept that's important to understand is that from evil, we extract good. And so when Jesus says it's necessary the scandals to take place, but woe to the one who is doing that, it's necessary for those things to happen so we can learn from them. It's a point of view, or the view of a point. So when we look at progression, evolution, we're talking about atrocities, but we have come a long way. The number of individuals that commit atrocity these days is a big minority. And what we need to put into perspective is that there was a time that these atrocities were well accepted in our society. Today, we call them atrocities, and they weren't considered atrocities. Today, just the fact that we call them atrocities means that we have learned from, where we were, and we have evolved, and today we have laws and we have policies that protect us against those individuals and that try to organize certain practices in our society. So the important point to take out of this is that God allows because it ends up being a learning tool for us. Every time we go, I'm always talking about this. We are today a society where we are having a difficult time relating at a personal level. We relate more with our phones than face to face. This is going to create problems. This is going to create imbalances. So it's necessary for the imbalances to take place so you have an increase in isolation, an increase in suicide among teenagers, and many other things that will start to happen. God let it happen because when we get to the bottom of the bottom and we look at ourselves, we're going to be forced to create solutions. And so this is how evolution takes place. We are free to do whatever we want. Our actions, when are disorganized, they will take us to the other end, which are the consequences. And God allows it to be this way because when we are miserable, we are going to together revise how we're using social networks because they're not evil. The problem is not the instrument. The problem is the use of the instrument. And so once we're dealing with a level of psychiatric disorders, isolation, kids and adults that don't know anymore to relate, and we are dealing with a very difficult social problem, then we're going to start studying. Scientists are going to look into that. We're going to start looking into education, and we're going to do a U-turn to find the midway where we're going to learn to live in equilibrium. So that's why, I think.
Thank you.
May I add one more
Marcia,
point?
we got like a minute and a half, so if
Yeah.
you could say, wrap it up for us.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also remind us of something that Julio mentioned, right, when he talked about the book, The Selfish Gene, and he talked that it should be the altruistic gene. If we can find and document altruistic measure steps in animals, of course, for survival of the species, us as humans, as much more evolved humans and beings, we should recognize that the altruistic gene exists in us through compassion. It exists in us through the God that lives within. And I think it's very important because in those moments of collective destructions and catastrophes, that's when we see so much of that. And it was discussed by Flavio as well. So I think if nothing else, this is to teach us, Suzana, that it's in us. We are loving beings and we have compassion in us. And I think that's the amazing thing for us to leave this question with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, I know this is our closing statement.
Yeah.
It will be 5 seconds. It's just because it's my last time I can address the audience.
Okay.
And because I'm here from New Jersey, and we are all very passionately about this movement. And I want to just thank everyone that came. We want the movement to grow. And one way of growing this movement is to be very thankful to those who participated in the movement. So all of you, my friends, who contributed for this day to be possible, from the bottom of my heart, we New Jerseyans, we are very proud of the work that we see here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you who submitted questions. There are some really great ones here. Unfortunately, we are short on time, but I will give them to those who are in charge, and I believe there will be follow-up. Thank you.